The morning is a sacred time. As the first rays of sunlight touch the earth, a quiet invitation is extended to each of us. This moment, filled with stillness and possibility, is an opportunity to turn our hearts toward the Creator and seek His guidance for the day ahead. Life often feels like a rush, filled with tasks, responsibilities, and uncertainties. Yet, when we take the time to pause at the beginning of each day, to seek God's direction, we set the foundation for a day lived in alignment with His purpose. The concept of seeking God's guidance each morning is not just about setting intentions or asking for blessings. It's about positioning ourselves in a posture of humility, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and that we need God's wisdom to navigate the complexities of life. This daily practice of turning to God transforms the way we approach our days. Instead of relying on our limited understanding, we lean into the infinite wisdom of the divine, trusting that He will lead us down the right path. One of the most significant teachings on this practice comes from Proverbs chapter 3 verses 5 to 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. These verses remind us of the importance of trust in our relationship with God. Trust is the foundation of faith, and when we place our trust in God, we are no longer bound by fear or doubt. Instead, we walk forward with confidence, knowing that the one who created us is guiding our steps. The journey of faith is not one that promises a life free from challenges. On the contrary, the road is often difficult, filled with obstacles and uncertainties. However, when we seek God's guidance each day, we are equipped with the strength and wisdom to face whatever comes our way. The challenges we encounter become opportunities for growth, moments where we can deepen our trust in God and strengthen our faith. In this daily practice of seeking God's direction, we learn the value of surrender. Surrendering to God doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of our need to control every aspect of our lives. It means trusting that God's plan is greater than anything we could imagine, and that His timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own. Surrendering is an act of faith, a recognition that while we may not know what the future holds, we know who holds the future. This concept of surrender is beautifully illustrated in the life of C.S. Lewis. Known for his intellectual prowess, Lewis began his spiritual journey as a staunch atheist. He relied heavily on reason and logic, dismissing faith as something for the weak. Yet, through meaningful relationships and deep introspection, Lewis began to see the coherence and depth of Christianity. He realized that faith is not the absence of reason, but the fulfillment of it. His life was transformed as he placed his trust in God, and this transformation is reflected in his writings, which have inspired countless individuals to seek a deeper relationship with the divine. In one of his most profound quotes, Lewis said, "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen. Not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." This statement encapsulates the transformative power of faith. When we seek God's guidance each day, our perspective shifts. We begin to see the world not through the lens of our own limitations, but through the eyes of faith. We see the hand of God at work in every detail, guiding us, shaping us, and leading us toward the life we were created to live. Each day is a new opportunity to align ourselves with God's will. In Matthew chapter 6 verse 11, we are taught to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." This simple request serves as a reminder that we are dependent on God not just for our physical sustenance, but for our spiritual nourishment as well. As we seek God's guidance each morning, we are asking for the wisdom, strength, and clarity to navigate the day ahead. We are inviting God to walk with us, to lead us, and to help us stay grounded in His purpose. Life is filled with choices, some small and others significant. In moments of decision-making, it's easy to rely on our own understanding, to follow the path that seems most logical or convenient. But when we seek God's guidance, we are reminded that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. God sees the bigger picture, and He knows what is best for us, even when we cannot see it ourselves. One of the most powerful examples of this is the story of Abraham. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland and journey to a land He would show him, Abraham didn't have all the details. He didn't know where he was going or what the future held. But he trusted God, and he stepped out in faith. This act of obedience set the course for Abraham's life, and it is a powerful reminder to us that faith often requires us to step into the unknown, trusting that God will guide us every step of the way. As we continue to seek God's direction, we are reminded of the importance of patience. In a world that values instant gratification, waiting on God's timing can be challenging. Yet, patience is a fundamental aspect of faith. It teaches us to trust in God's perfect timing, even when it doesn't align with our own. When we wait on God, we are not simply waiting for an answer. We are being shaped and refined in the process. This period of waiting is often where the most profound growth happens. It is in the stillness, in the moments where we are uncertain of the next step, that God works deeply within us. He uses these seasons of waiting to strengthen our faith, to draw us closer to Him, and to prepare us for what lies ahead. Just as a seed planted in the ground must wait before it can grow, so too must we wait as God prepares us for the next chapter of our journey. In these moments of waiting, it's important to remember that God is never idle. He is always at work, even when we cannot see it. His plan is unfolding perfectly, and when the time is right, He will reveal the next step. Our job is to remain faithful, to keep seeking Him, and to trust that He is working all things for our good. Living a life of faith requires us to let go of our need for control and trust that God's plan is greater than our own. This is not always easy, especially when we are faced with challenges or disappointments. But as we continue to seek God's guidance each day, we begin to see that His plan is always better than anything we could have imagined. We begin to trust that even in the difficult moments, God is at work, bringing about something good. There is a profound peace that comes from living in alignment with God's will. This peace is not dependent on our circumstances. It is a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that comes from knowing that we are exactly where we are meant to be. As we continue to seek God's guidance, we are reminded that we are not walking this journey alone. God is with us, guiding us, providing for us, and leading us toward a life of purpose and fulfillment. Gratitude plays a significant role in this process. When we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we shift our focus from what we lack to what we have. We begin to see the blessings in our lives, even in the midst of challenges. Gratitude opens our hearts to receive more of God's peace and joy, and it helps us to stay grounded in the present moment. As we live with gratitude, we also learn to trust God more deeply. Gratitude reminds us of all the ways God has been faithful in the past, and it builds our faith for the future. It helps us to see that God's provision is always enough, and that He is working all things for our good. Living a life of gratitude and trust is a daily practice. It requires us to continually seek God's direction, to surrender our plans to Him, and to trust that His ways are higher than our ways. And as we do, we will find that our lives are filled with more peace, more joy, and more purpose than we could ever have imagined. This is the beauty of walking with God. It's a journey of trust, surrender, and faith. It's a journey where we are constantly being shaped and refined, where we are learning to let go of our need for control and to trust in the One who holds the future. As we continue to seek God's guidance each day, we will find that our lives are transformed, that we are filled with a sense of peace and purpose, and that we are living the life we were created to live. Living a life aligned with God's will is not just about the big moments, those defining decisions or challenges we face. It is also about the small, everyday choices we make. Each morning, as we rise to meet the day, we are presented with a multitude of opportunities to align ourselves with God's purpose. Whether it's in how we interact with others, how we approach our work, or even how we manage our thoughts, each moment is a chance to seek God's guidance and to live in alignment with His will. One of the most important aspects of this journey is learning to live with open hands. So often, we hold on tightly to our plans, our dreams, and our desires. We have a vision of how we want our lives to unfold, and we cling to that vision, afraid of what might happen if we let go. But living with open hands means surrendering our plans to God and trusting that His plans are greater than ours. This can be a difficult practice, especially when it feels like we are being asked to let go of something we care deeply about. But when we release our grip on the things we hold dear, we create space for God to move in our lives. We allow Him to lead us down paths we never would have chosen for ourselves, but that ultimately lead to greater peace, joy, and fulfillment. Living with open hands also means being willing to receive what God has for us, even when it doesn't look like what we expected. Sometimes, God answers our prayers in ways that surprise us. He may bring people, opportunities, or experiences into our lives that are different from what we had imagined. But when we live with open hands, we are able to receive these blessings with gratitude, trusting that they are part of God's perfect plan for our lives. This practice of living with open hands goes hand in hand with living with an open heart. An open heart is one that is receptive to God's love and grace, one that is willing to be transformed by the Spirit. It is a heart that is willing to be vulnerable, to trust, and to let God shape us into the people we were created to be. As we walk this path of faith, we are reminded of the importance of keeping our hearts open to God's presence. It's easy to close ourselves off, to build walls of self-protection, especially when we've experienced pain or disappointment. But living with an open heart allows us to experience the fullness of God's love and to be instruments of His love in the world. This openness to God's love and guidance can be seen in the lives of countless individuals throughout the Bible. Take, for instance, the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel appeared to her and told her that she would bear the Son of God, Mary's response was one of open-hearted surrender. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know how her life would unfold. But she trusted in God's plan and said, "Let it be to me according to your word." Her willingness to open her heart to God's will set the stage for one of the greatest miracles in history, the birth of the Savior. Mary's story is a powerful reminder to us that when we live with an open heart, we make room for God to work miracles in our lives. We may not always understand His plan, and we may not always know what the future holds, but when we trust in His love and guidance, we are able to walk forward with confidence, knowing that He is with us every step of the way. As we continue on this journey of faith, we are invited to cultivate a spirit of gratitude. Gratitude is a powerful tool that helps us stay grounded in God's goodness, even when life is challenging. It shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, from our struggles to God's provision, and from our fears to His faithfulness. Gratitude is not just about giving thanks for the good things in our lives. It's about recognizing God's presence in everything, the big and the small, the joyful and the difficult. It's about trusting that even in the hard moments, God is at work, bringing about something good. The practice of gratitude has the power to transform our perspective. When we choose to focus on what we are thankful for, we open ourselves up to experience more of God's peace and joy. We begin to see the world through the lens of His love, and we are better able to trust in His plan for our lives. Gratitude also helps us to cultivate contentment. In a world that constantly tells us we need more success, more possessions, more recognition, it can be easy to feel like we are always falling short. But when we practice gratitude, we are reminded that we already have enough. We are reminded that God's provision is sufficient and that He is the source of our true fulfillment. This contentment that comes from gratitude is not about complacency. It's about trusting that we are exactly where we are meant to be. It's about recognizing that God's timing is perfect and that He is guiding us toward the life we were created to live. As we cultivate gratitude in our daily lives, we begin to experience more peace, more joy, and more satisfaction in the present moment. Another aspect of living a life aligned with God's will is learning to embrace the unexpected. God often leads us down paths that we didn't anticipate, opening doors we never expected to walk through. These surprises can be both exciting and challenging, but when we trust in God's plan, we are able to embrace them with faith. Throughout the Bible, we see stories of individuals who were led into the unexpected by God. Moses, who was tending sheep in the wilderness, was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Paul, who once persecuted Christians, became one of the most influential apostles in the early church. Each of these individuals had their own plans and ideas about how their lives would unfold, but God had something greater in store for them. The same is true for us. We may have our own vision for how our lives should go, but God often has a different and better plan. When we open ourselves up to His direction, we allow Him to lead us into the unexpected, trusting that His ways are higher than our ways and that His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Embracing the unexpected doesn't mean that we won't experience fear or doubt along the way. There will be times when we are unsure of what lies ahead or when the road seems difficult. But it is in these moments that we are called to trust in God's faithfulness. He is with us, guiding us and providing for us every step of the way. As we walk in alignment with God's will, we are reminded that His plan for our lives is not just about us. It is about the ways in which He wants to use us to bring His love and grace to others. Living a life of faith means being open to the ways in which God wants to work through us to make a difference in the world. Each of us has been uniquely gifted and called by God to serve in different ways. Whether it's through our work, our relationships, or our community, God has a purpose for each of us. When we seek His direction and walk in alignment with His will, we are better able to discern how He wants to use our gifts to bless others and bring glory to His name. As we continue to cultivate this daily practice of seeking God's guidance, we will find that our lives are filled with more peace, more purpose, and more joy. We will discover that the path God has laid before us is one of abundance, not in the material sense, but in the richness of a life lived in relationship with Him. In this journey of faith, we are constantly being invited to go deeper, to trust more fully, and to surrender more completely to God's will. It is a journey that requires patience, perseverance, and faith. But it is also a journey that is filled with hope, joy, and transformation. As we seek God's direction each day, we are reminded that we are not walking this path alone. God is with us, guiding us, strengthening us, and leading us toward the life He has prepared for us. It is a life of purpose, a life of peace, and a life of joy that comes from living in alignment with the Creator. Let us continue to walk this path of faith, trusting in God's guidance, surrendering to His will, and living with open hands and open hearts. For it is in this daily practice that we will find the life we were created to live, a life that reflects the love, grace, and goodness of the one who holds us in His hands. The journey of faith is often marked by moments of doubt and uncertainty, but it is also filled with opportunities for growth and transformation. As we seek God's guidance daily, we are reminded that faith is not about having all the answers. It is about trusting the one who does. It is about stepping forward in faith, even when the path ahead is unclear, knowing that God is guiding us every step of the way. One of the most important aspects of walking this path is learning to let go of the need for control. As humans, we have a natural tendency to want to control the outcomes of our lives. We make plans, set goals, and work hard to achieve them, believing that we are in control of our destiny. But the reality is that we are not in control. Life is unpredictable, and no matter how carefully we plan, things don't always go as expected. This is where the practice of surrender comes in. Surrendering to God doesn't mean giving up on our dreams or aspirations. Rather, it means trusting that God's plan is greater than our own. It means acknowledging that, while we may not understand the twists and turns of life, we trust that God is leading us toward a future filled with hope and promise. Surrendering to God also means letting go of the fear that often accompanies uncertainty. Fear is a powerful emotion that can paralyze us, preventing us from moving forward in faith. But when we surrender our fears to God, we are reminded that He is with us, that He is in control, and that His love casts out all fear. This act of surrender requires a daily commitment. It is not something we do once and then forget about. Each day, as we rise to meet the challenges of life, we must choose to surrender our plans, our fears, and our desires to God. We must choose to trust in His goodness and His faithfulness, even when we cannot see the way ahead. As we continue to seek God's guidance each day, we begin to develop a deeper sense of trust in His plan. This trust is not something that happens overnight. It is something that is built over time, through consistent prayer, reflection, and surrender. The more we trust God, the more we are able to experience the peace that comes from knowing that we are in His hands. One of the most beautiful aspects of this journey is the way in which God reveals Himself to us through the small, everyday moments of life. It is easy to look for God in the big, dramatic moments, the miracles, the breakthroughs, the life-changing decisions. But God is also present in the quiet, ordinary moments. He is present in the gentle whisper of the wind, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the laughter of a loved one, and the stillness of a quiet morning. These small moments are often where God does His most profound work in our lives. It is in these moments that we are reminded of His presence, His love, and His faithfulness. And as we cultivate a practice of seeking God in these everyday moments, we begin to develop a deeper awareness of His presence in our lives. This awareness of God's presence is a key component of walking in alignment with His will. When we are attuned to God's voice, we are better able to discern His guidance in our lives. We begin to recognize the nudges of the Holy Spirit, the subtle ways in which God directs our paths, and the peace that accompanies walking in step with Him. This peace is one of the most powerful gifts of living a life aligned with God's will. It is a peace that transcends our circumstances, a peace that remains even in the midst of life's storms. It is a peace that comes from knowing that, no matter what happens, we are held in the hands of a loving and faithful God. This peace does not mean that life will always be easy or that we will never face challenges. In fact, the journey of faith is often marked by trials and difficulties. But the difference is that, when we are walking in alignment with God's will, we are able to face these challenges with a sense of peace and confidence, knowing that God is with us and that He is working all things for our good. One of the most important ways we cultivate this peace is through the practice of prayer. Prayer is not just about asking God for what we want. It is about communing with Him, opening our hearts to His presence, and aligning our desires with His will. It is through prayer that we deepen our relationship with God, that we learn to trust Him more fully, and that we experience His peace in our lives. Prayer is also a way of surrendering our worries and anxieties to God. In Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7, the Apostle Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." These verses remind us that, when we bring our worries to God in prayer, He exchanges them for His peace. This peace is not something we can create or manufacture on our own. It is a gift from God, one that guards our hearts and minds and allows us to face life's challenges with confidence and grace. Another important aspect of walking in alignment with God's will is learning to cultivate a spirit of gratitude. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, from our problems to God's provision, and from our struggles to His faithfulness. It reminds us of all the ways God has been faithful in the past, and it builds our faith for the future. Gratitude is a practice that requires intentionality. It is easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and forget to take the time to pause and give thanks. But when we make gratitude a daily practice, we begin to see the world through a different lens. We begin to recognize God's presence in the small, everyday moments of life, and we are better able to trust Him in the midst of uncertainty. One way to cultivate a practice of gratitude is by keeping a gratitude journal. Each day, take a few moments to write down 3 things you are grateful for. These can be big or small, but the act of writing them down helps to cement them in your heart and mind. Over time, this practice will help to shift your perspective and cultivate a heart of thanksgiving. Another way to practice gratitude is through prayer. Before you present your requests to God, take a moment to thank Him for what He has already done in your life. As you pray, focus on the blessings you have received, the ways God has provided for you, and the promises He has fulfilled. Gratitude also helps us to stay grounded in the present moment. So often, we are focused on the future, on what we need to do, what we hope to achieve, or what we are waiting for. But gratitude brings us back to the present, reminding us to appreciate the gifts of today. It helps us to see the beauty in the simple things, the sunrise, a kind word, a moment of quiet, and to recognize God's hand in every detail of our lives. As we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we begin to experience more peace, more joy, and more contentment. We begin to see the world through the lens of God's goodness, and we are able to trust more fully in His plan for our lives. Living a life aligned with God's will is not just about the big moments. It is about the small, everyday choices we make. Each day, as we seek God's guidance, we are presented with opportunities to align ourselves with His purpose. Whether it's in how we interact with others, how we approach our work, or how we manage our thoughts, each moment is a chance to live in alignment with God's will. As we continue on this journey, we will find that our lives are filled with more peace, more purpose, and more joy. We will discover that, as we surrender our plans to God and trust in His guidance, He leads us down paths we never would have chosen for ourselves, but that ultimately lead to greater fulfillment. We will learn that living a life of faith requires us to let go of our need for control and trust in the one who holds the future. This journey of faith is one that requires patience, perseverance, and trust. It is not always easy, and there will be moments of doubt and uncertainty along the way. But as we continue to seek God's direction each day, we will find that He is always with us, guiding us, providing for us, and leading us toward the life He has prepared for us. Let us continue to walk this path of faith, trusting in God's guidance, surrendering to His will, and living with open hands and open hearts. For it is in this daily practice that we will find the life we were created to live, a life of purpose, peace, and joy, anchored in the goodness of the Creator. As we draw closer to the end of this reflection on seeking God's direction, let us remember that this is a lifelong journey. It is a journey that invites us to grow deeper in our relationship with God, to trust Him more fully, and to align our lives with His will. Each day is an opportunity to walk in faith, to surrender our plans, and to trust that God is leading us toward a future filled with hope and promise. As we continue to walk this path of faith, seeking God's direction each day, we begin to understand that this journey is not only about finding the right answers or solutions to our problems, but also about growing in our relationship with the Creator. It is a process of deepening trust, of opening our hearts to God's love and wisdom, and of learning to align our will with His. This process of alignment is not something that happens overnight. It is something that unfolds gradually, as we spend more time in God's presence, as we listen for His voice, and as we surrender more of ourselves to His guidance. It requires patience, humility, and a willingness to be transformed from the inside out. One of the most powerful aspects of this journey is the way in which God uses the challenges and trials of life to shape us. Often, it is in the moments of greatest difficulty that we are most open to God's work in our lives. When we reach the end of our own strength, when we are faced with situations that are beyond our control, we are reminded of our dependence on God. It is in these moments of surrender that God's grace becomes most evident. The Apostle Paul understood this dynamic well. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9, he writes, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." These words are a powerful reminder that, in our moments of weakness, God's strength is revealed. When we are willing to admit our limitations and surrender our need for control, we open ourselves up to experience the fullness of God's power and grace. This is one of the paradoxes of faith, that it is in our moments of weakness that we are strongest, not because of our own abilities, but because of God's presence in our lives. When we stop trying to rely on our own strength and instead place our trust in God, we are able to face life's challenges with a sense of peace and confidence, knowing that we are not walking this journey alone. This trust in God's strength is something that grows over time, as we experience His faithfulness in our lives. Each time we face a challenge and turn to God for help, we are reminded of His love and provision. Each time we surrender a fear or worry to God and experience His peace in return, our trust in Him deepens. This is the beauty of the journey of faith, that it is a continual process of growth, of learning to trust God more fully, and of being transformed by His grace. As we continue to seek God's direction each day, we also begin to recognize the importance of listening for His voice. In a world that is constantly filled with noise and distractions, it can be difficult to hear the still, small voice of the Holy Spirit. Yet, it is in these quiet moments of listening that we are able to discern God's guidance most clearly. Listening for God's voice requires intentionality. It requires us to set aside time each day to be still, to quiet our minds, and to open our hearts to God's presence. This can be challenging, especially in the midst of a busy life filled with responsibilities and distractions. But when we make it a priority to listen for God's voice, we are better able to discern His will for our lives and to align ourselves with His purpose. This practice of listening is not just about seeking answers or solutions to our problems. It is about deepening our relationship with God. It is about learning to recognize His presence in the everyday moments of life, about being attuned to the ways in which He is speaking to us through the people and circumstances around us. And as we become more attuned to God's voice, we are better able to respond to His guidance with faith and obedience. Obedience is a key component of walking in alignment with God's will. It is not enough to simply hear God's voice. We must also be willing to follow where He leads, even when the path is difficult or unclear. This requires trust. Trust that God's plan is greater than our own, and trust that He is leading us toward a future filled with hope and promise. One of the most beautiful examples of obedience in the Bible is the story of Abraham. When God called Abraham to leave his homeland and journey to a land He would show him, Abraham didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for all the details or demand to know how everything would unfold. Instead, he trusted God's promise and stepped out in faith. This act of obedience set the course for Abraham's life, and it is a powerful reminder to us that, when we trust and obey God, He leads us toward a life filled with purpose and blessing. Obedience to God is not always easy. There will be times when His guidance challenges us to step outside of our comfort zones, to let go of things we hold dear, or to take risks that feel uncertain. But as we continue to walk in obedience, we begin to see the fruit of this faithfulness in our lives. We begin to experience the peace that comes from knowing we are walking in alignment with God's will, and we are able to trust more fully in His plan for our future. As we continue to cultivate this daily practice of seeking God's direction, we are reminded that this journey is not just about us. It is about the ways in which God wants to use us to bring His love and grace to others. Each of us has been uniquely gifted and called by God to serve in different ways, and when we seek His guidance, we are better able to discern how He wants to use our gifts to bless others and bring glory to His name. This calling to serve is one of the most important aspects of walking in alignment with God's will. It is not about seeking personal success or fulfillment. It is about being vessels of God's love and grace in the world. It is about being willing to use the gifts and talents God has given us to make a difference in the lives of others, whether through our work, our relationships, or our community. As we continue to seek God's direction each day, we will find that He leads us into opportunities to serve others in ways that bring joy and fulfillment. We will discover that, as we align our lives with God's will, we are able to experience the richness of a life lived in relationship with Him. A life that is filled with purpose, peace, and joy. This journey of faith is one that requires patience, perseverance, and trust. It is not always easy, and there will be moments of doubt and uncertainty along the way. But as we continue to seek God's direction, we will find that He is always with us, guiding us, providing for us, and leading us toward the life He has prepared for us. One of the most important lessons we learn on this journey is the power of gratitude. Gratitude shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, from our struggles to God's provision, and from our fears to His faithfulness. It reminds us of all the ways God has been faithful in the past, and it builds our faith for the future. Gratitude is a practice that requires intentionality. It is easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and forget to take the time to pause and give thanks. But when we make gratitude a daily practice, we begin to see the world through a different lens. We begin to recognize God's presence in the small, everyday moments of life, and we are better able to trust Him in the midst of uncertainty. Gratitude also helps us to stay grounded in the present moment. So often, we are focused on the future, on what we need to do, what we hope to achieve, or what we are waiting for. But gratitude brings us back to the present, reminding us to appreciate the gifts of today. It helps us to see the beauty in the simple things, the sunrise, a kind word, a moment of quiet, and to recognize God's hand in every detail of our lives. As we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we begin to experience more peace, more joy, and more contentment. We begin to see the world through the lens of God's goodness, and we are able to trust more fully in His plan for our lives. This journey of faith is one that requires us to continually seek God's guidance, to surrender our plans to Him, and to trust that His ways are higher than our ways. And as we do, we will find that our lives are transformed, that we are filled with a sense of peace and purpose that cannot be found anywhere else. As we continue this journey, one of the most significant truths we discover is that faith is not static. It grows and evolves over time. Each day presents new challenges and opportunities that invite us to deepen our relationship with God. And as we grow in faith, we also grow in our ability to trust in God's guidance and wisdom. This process of spiritual growth is gradual, and it often takes place in ways that are both unexpected and profound. Faith is not about having all the answers or knowing exactly what the future holds. Instead, it is about trusting that God holds the future and that His plan for our lives is greater than anything we could ever imagine. This trust, however, is not something that comes naturally. It is something that we must actively cultivate. As we face the uncertainties of life, we are given opportunities to lean into God's wisdom and to trust that He is leading us down the right path, even when we cannot see it. This is where the concept of walking by faith comes into play. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7, Paul writes, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." These words serve as a powerful reminder that the journey of faith is not about seeing the entire path ahead, but about taking one step at a time, trusting that God will guide us along the way. Walking by faith requires us to let go of our desire for control and to embrace the unknown with a sense of peace, knowing that God is with us. Each step we take in faith strengthens our trust in God. We may not always understand why certain things happen or why God leads us in a particular direction, but as we continue to walk in faith, we begin to see the bigger picture. We begin to recognize that God's timing is perfect, that His ways are higher than our ways, and that His plan for our lives is filled with purpose and meaning. Walking by faith also means being open to change and transformation. As we seek God's guidance, we are often called to step outside of our comfort zones, to let go of old patterns of thinking, and to embrace new ways of living. This process of transformation is not always easy. It requires us to be vulnerable, to be willing to let go of what is familiar, and to trust that God is leading us towards something greater. Transformation is a central theme in the Christian faith. Throughout the Bible, we see countless examples of individuals who were transformed by their encounters with God. Moses, for example, was a man who doubted his ability to lead. Yet God transformed him into a powerful leader who delivered the Israelites from slavery. Paul, once a persecutor of Christians, was transformed into one of the most influential apostles in the early church. And Peter, who denied knowing Jesus 3 times, was transformed into a bold preacher of the gospel. These stories serve as reminders that God is in the business of transformation. He takes our weaknesses, our doubts, and our fears, and He uses them to bring about His purposes. This process of transformation is ongoing, and it is something that continues throughout our lives as we seek to follow God's will. As we open ourselves up to this process of transformation, we begin to experience the peace and joy that come from living in alignment with God's will. This peace is not something that is dependent on our circumstances. It is a deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing that we are walking in step with the Creator of the universe. It is a peace that allows us to face life's challenges with confidence, knowing that we are not walking this journey alone. One of the most powerful ways in which we experience this peace is through prayer. Prayer is not just a way of bringing our requests to God. It is a way of communing with Him, of opening our hearts to His presence, and of aligning our desires with His will. Prayer is a conversation with God, one that invites us to listen as much as we speak, to be still and know that He is God. Through prayer, we are reminded of our dependence on God. We are reminded that, no matter how capable or self-sufficient we may feel, We cannot navigate this life on our own. We need God's wisdom, guidance, and strength to face the challenges that come our way. And as we bring our worries, fears, and uncertainties to God in prayer, we experience the peace that comes from knowing that He is in control. This peace is described beautifully in Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7, where Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." These verses remind us that, when we bring our worries to God in prayer, He exchanges them for His peace. A peace that is beyond human comprehension and that guards our hearts and minds from the anxieties of life. As we continue to cultivate a life of prayer, we also begin to develop a deeper sense of gratitude. Gratitude is a practice that shifts our focus from what we lack to what we have, from our struggles to God's provision, and from our fears to His faithfulness. It is a way of recognizing all the ways in which God has been faithful in the past and of building our faith for the future. Gratitude is not just about giving thanks for the obvious blessings in our lives. It is about recognizing God's presence in every aspect of our lives, both the good and the challenging. It is about trusting that, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, God is at work, bringing about His purposes. This practice of gratitude has the power to transform our perspective. When we focus on what we are thankful for, we open ourselves up to experience more of God's peace and joy. We begin to see the world through the lens of His goodness, and we are better able to trust Him in the midst of uncertainty. One of the most practical ways to cultivate gratitude is through the practice of keeping a gratitude journal. Each day, take a few moments to write down a few things for which you are grateful. These can be big or small, but the act of writing them down helps to solidify them in your heart and mind. Over time, this practice will help to shift your perspective and to cultivate a heart of thanksgiving. Gratitude also helps us to stay grounded in the present moment. In a world that is constantly focused on what's next, on the future, on goals, on what we hope to achieve, it can be easy to overlook the beauty and blessings of the present. But gratitude brings us back to the here and now, reminding us to appreciate the gifts of today. It helps us to recognize the beauty in the simple things, the warmth of the sun, the laughter of a friend, the peace of a quiet morning, and to see God's hand at work in every detail of our lives. As we continue to cultivate a spirit of gratitude, we begin to experience more peace, more joy, and more contentment. We begin to see the world through the lens of God's goodness, and we are better able to trust in His plan for our lives. Living a life aligned with God's will requires us to continually seek His guidance, to surrender our plans to Him, and to trust that His ways are higher than our ways. It is a journey that requires patience, perseverance, and faith, but it is also a journey that is filled with hope, joy, and transformation. This journey is not one that we walk alone. God is with us every step of the way, guiding us, strengthening us, and leading us toward the life He has prepared for us. And as we continue to seek His direction, we will find that our lives are filled with more peace, more purpose, and more joy than we could ever have imagined. As we come to the close of this reflection on seeking God's direction, let us remember that this is a lifelong journey. It is a journey that invites us to grow deeper in our relationship with God, to trust Him more fully, and to align our lives with His will. Each day is an opportunity to walk in faith, to surrender our plans, and to trust that God is leading us toward a future filled with hope and promise. Let us continue to seek God's guidance each day, trusting in His wisdom and walking in alignment with His will. For it is in this daily pursuit that we will find the life we were created to live, a life of purpose, peace, and joy that comes from walking with the Creator. Each morning, as we rise to meet the day, we are presented with a sacred invitation. This invitation is an opportunity to seek God's guidance, to surrender our plans to Him, and to trust that He will lead us along the path He has prepared for us. As we accept this invitation, we begin to experience the peace and joy that come from living a life aligned with God's will. And as we continue to walk this path of faith, we will discover that the journey is one of transformation, one that leads us ever closer to the heart of the Creator. As we reflect on the journey of seeking God's direction each day, we are reminded that this is a lifelong pursuit, one that requires patience, trust, and a willingness to surrender. It is a path that invites us to grow deeper in our relationship with God, to align our desires with His will, and to trust in His perfect timing. Each morning brings a new opportunity to walk in faith, to place our hopes and dreams in the hands of the Creator, and to embrace the peace that comes from knowing that we are not walking this journey alone. This journey of faith is not without its challenges, but it is through these challenges that we are strengthened and transformed. We learn to trust God more fully, to recognize His presence in the everyday moments of life, and to lean on Him in times of uncertainty. As we continue to seek His guidance, we begin to experience the peace and joy that come from living in alignment with His will. A peace that transcends our circumstances and a joy that is rooted in the knowledge that we are walking the path He has prepared for us. In the end, the pursuit of God's direction is not about reaching a final destination, but about continually drawing closer to the One who knows us better than we know ourselves. It is about living a life that reflects His love, grace, and purpose. And as we continue to seek His guidance each day, we will find that we are not only transformed ourselves, but we are also able to bring His love and light to the world around us. Let us commit ourselves to this daily practice of seeking God's direction. Let us approach each morning with open hands and open hearts, ready to receive whatever God has in store for us. And as we do, may we experience the fullness of life that comes from walking in step with the Creator, the life we were always meant to live, filled with purpose, peace, and joy.